For me, it's very much about storytelling, and I'll present some examples here to hopefully give you an idea of how I think we can best convey, and why, in particular, why storytelling I think is actually critical. Andrew Stanton, the guy that did the Toy Story movies and things like that, is very much about, don't give the audience don't give the audience the answer, give them sort of stepping stones along the way, build them up through an experience, and they'll arrive at for your desired goal in their own way anyway, but they'll have a much greater retention and much more engagement with it. It's pretty much well known that actually storytelling really improves your learning and improves your memory. And this is not me, it's hopefully just pontificating. If you've ever seen those TV shows where they teach people how to remember, for example, a whole deck of cards and stuff like that. So I've got just 3 cards here. They don't just look at the cards, they come up with sentences like this. Now, this sentence only makes sense to me, but they come up with sentences that makes sense to them. But it's all about winding together the things you need to learn or memorize into a story. For example, for me, that sentence is, I dig the Queen, so the Queen of Spades. Spades are used for digging. When listening to punk music, King Diamond was a punk group rock band I used to listen to when I used to listen to punk rock music back in the day. And number 1 in the club is the Ace of Spades. So memory techniques that you get taught are you associate a story which brings together the elements of the information you're trying to record. That's our job as presenters, to present a story that actually helps people retain the assets or elements of that story. What constitutes the story? There's a lot of literature that talks about, back before civilization got as civilized as we are today, that people used to sit around the campfire, and that's how you can convey information to the next generation. There's a lot of stories about indigenous people in Australia here. They literally would, that's how, the elders will tell stories to the next generation pass those stories on to their children, etc. And stories have a beginning, they develop, which means, there'll be some conflict, maybe there'll be a predicament, something that creates arousal, and then often a protagonist. There needs to be someone who's the focus of that story, and then that person resolves the issue. They emerge victorious. Every story you can almost break into those 3 phases. For example, we have a hare and a tortoise. Hopefully most people are familiar with that nursery rhyme. They decide to race. The hare gets so cocky that he falls asleep. The tortoise passes him and wins. So we have development of the story, we have a conflict, we have protagonists, and then we have a resolution. And it's never actually said in the story, but it has an impact in the sense that, persistence and being cocky aren't the way to go, and perseverance, will win the day. So those things are never spoken to us in the story. The story is about rabbits and turtles, but we go away with a lasting impression. The thing that the author was trying to convey to us is left with us, even though it was never mentioned. That's an idea, that's a goal for us as technical presenters, to follow that same process. And my view is that any topic can be storytelling. And let's look at an example of how I could talk product and then wind it back into a story which reveals the product. If we look at this feature, this came out in 18C, which is Alta System Cancel SQL, the ability to cancel someone's running SQL without destroying their whole session. I could do a slide like this with hey, here's a new culture, you can cancel a session. But what we want to do is make it into storytelling, which resonates with the audience. And that the story isn't about the feature itself. The story is about what leads up to it from the audience's perspective. And this is the story. Isn't it sad that as DBAs, we spend our lives with some databases on our customer site, which are just things of beauty, but the vast majority of things like this. The code is just all over the shop. The design was perhaps never put in place that well. It was rushed to market because we're all under such incredible time deadlines and timeframes. So we end up with things like this. It's just a nightmare. People running these incredibly hectic SQLs. And this is our only recourse at the moment. We have to log on there and kill their session. And the moment we do that, we have very, very upset customers because their transaction state's gone, their session's gone, they have to reconnect. For some tools, the tool may crash. They're very upset with you as a DBA, and yet all you're doing is your job, which is protecting the server resources. But thankfully now in 18C, we have Alta System Cancel SQL. And so that is the exact same presentation of the feature from the perspective of storytelling. And the most beautiful thing about storytelling is storytellings lead to keeping the audience engaged into what you're going to say next. I finish that story, but that story creates a continuation called a hook. A hook is something that someone um, basically creates in their presentation or in their video that has the audience go, okay, I've come to a logical conclusion. Rather than my attention now being moved away, there's something left for me to go that keeps me engaged, keeps me thinking, I wonder what's coming next. And that story would create to a hook to another story, which is, yes, it's all well and good to go away and kill these sessions, but it still means if the server is being smashed at 2 in the morning, I'm fast asleep and I'm going to get these text messages telling me there's an idiot in the database. I still run Council SQL, but I still had to wake up. But luckily, now in 19C, I'll have quarantining, which means I don't even have to get up out of bed anymore. I don't have to cancel that SQL because it's canceled before I even have to get out of bed, which gives me a good night's sleep. Storytelling leads you into more storytelling, which is cool because it creates these hooks that almost doesn't let people leave your presentation mentally. Putting that into the campfire metaphor, we have the beginning of the story, a background of what the DBA does. They look after things. And then we have the development of the story. Bad SQL is the adversary, and the DBA battles, he has conflict. He has to battle valiantly against the bad SQL. And then we have resolution. The DBA is the victor. And the impact here, the takeaways we have is the fact that we have new features and we have a good night's sleep. So they're the lasting impressions that get left with the audience. And we didn't actually really have to tell them much about the feature itself besides mainly just the syntax. The storytelling is what resonates with them.